Did you know in the original series of Fireman Sam, Sam builds a robot? And he has a name, Bentley. For a fairly grounded show, it's one of the last things you'd expect to see in the village of Pontypandy. And Sam was able to build Bentley within his own shed. So presumably in the world of Fireman Sam, it's not too hard building a robot. So gradually over time, could we potentially see a robot uprising in the Fireman Sam universe? Well, this ain't what the video's about. Instead, we're talking about a potential lost pilot. So if that sounds like your type of cup of tea, then be sure to subscribe. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start off with a wee bit of context. Initially airing as a Welsh show on November 1st of 1987, Fireman Sam is a stop-motion animated children's series that's set within the Welsh town of Pontypandy, where the episode focuses on not just the firefighters, but the civilians of the village, with S4C being its original home channel. And just over 2 weeks later, the English version debuted on BBC television. The show spawned 14 seasons, with new episodes being made today, although now in CGI rather than stop motion, still maintaining its popularity over 35 years later. Coinciding with the booming interest of lost media within the early 2020s, that fans of the franchise have noticed that within the Fireman Sam 88 annual, published the same year of the premiere of the show, that it features rare and exclusive images of the cast that cannot be found within the main show, leading fans to speculate that there may be a lost episode of Fireman Sam, maybe it being potentially an unaired pilot. In 1986, just about a year before the show came to air, the publishers of Little Owl Books made 4 picture books of Fireman Sam, nearly all of which would be later adapted for the main show. Sam's Windy Day would later be made into Kite, Butterfly Catchers would be turned into Trevor's Training, and Norman's Naughty Day would be Norman's Tricky Day. But the only one that wouldn't be adapted would be Sam's Forgetful Day, which was actually the first book of the 4-part set. So could this have once been thought of as a possible story for the series that just never made it to production? Alright, let's look at the contents within the annual to see what images we have, such as this one alleged to be from the pilot, featuring my favourite character while I was growing up with the show, Bella Lasagna, where as a kid I would always try and mimic her Italian accent, with my poor family often putting up with me saying, "Mamma mia!" Yeah, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Miss Lasagna. Anyway, in the early years of the programme, Bella would always be making Sam his favourite sandwiches, which we would see Sam picking up his ready-made meals in the intro, which this image most closely resembles Bella's appearance in the opening, although we never directly see her waving like this in the animation, which this image may represent either a deleted shot or an earlier version of the intro. Interestingly, there are 2 images of Sarah and Jane in the annual, with them eating ice cream just outside of Pontypandy's park. The closest that we get to see something like this image is in the episode What's Gone Up, which aired on November 10th of 1994, 7 years after the annual of 88 was published, and at the time the only episodes that were fully created and developed was season 1 and 2, so the images that are seen in the annual are probably unrelated to the season 4 episode, especially more so since in the annual we see Sarah and James encounter their Uncle Sam outside the park, where in the What's Gone Up episode, Sarah and James are walking away from the park, and Sam is nowhere to be seen. Instead, the 2 siblings encounter Norman. So, with a handful of images that we never got to see in the main show, could we conclude that there's maybe a lost or pilot episode of Fireman Sam that's never been released? Injecting my own viewpoint, I don't particularly think so, and this is how I came to that conclusion. To start with, it's been softly speculated that Sam in the annual looks slightly different from his TV counterpart, but after looking at them side by side, they look virtually identical. I think it's a bit hard to definitively say, since Sam's facial proportions can look different depending on what angle you're looking at the model, and there's not many proper pictures in the annual where you're looking at Sam face on. From what I can assess, I would say Sam in the annual looks pretty on model when lined up to the TV show, using his circle nose as a measurement. When he's got his helmet on, it's about 6 circles high and 3 circles across his face, which the TV show Sam lines up in the same way. Okay, but could it still be theoretically possible that there may be a lost pilot of Fireman Sam, as the annual features images that are not seen in any episodes of the show? Well, here's another idea. What if the images are just promotional material photographs to represent the show, but not a specific episode. I mean, it happens all the time, where in advertisements you may get visuals that don't necessarily line up to the final product. As a kid, I had a Simpsons DVD where it had Bart and Homer fighting with lightsabers. On the disc it had the episode featuring Mark Hamill, and I remember as a kid being really disappointed watching the episode that image on the cover never happens in the program. In the annual, there's this image where you've got Norman skating off on his skateboard, almost like he's up to no good, and his mum Doris is rolling her eyes in the background, looking like that she's thinking, oh goodness, here we go again, even if you've never seen Fireman Sam. By this one image, you can pretty much gather as to what Norman and Doris are like in the show, which is the exact purpose for when it comes to promotional and advertisement material. There's even other advertisement images of Norman and Doris similar to the one as seen in the annual. The two images with Sarah and James may have been just set up by the marketing team to have a pleasant looking image of Sam alongside his niece and nephew. The image of the Jupiter fire engine in the far background, if you look closely, there's nobody inside. So maybe perhaps when the picture was taken, it was something hastily rushed together to give the marketing team more images of the fire engine. What makes me think even further that this unspecified pilot was never created, that looking up official sources that there's no mention of the creators ever making a pilot. The only article I can find that actively entertains the idea that this pilot may exist was one that was written up on fandom.com on the Lost Media Archive branch. Now, before I go any further, let me just say that there's nothing wrong of using sites like Wikipedia or the Lost Media Wiki for research, but I would definitely encourage if you were somebody looking into the topic to go down to references to have a further look at the sources, especially if you're a journalist or a content creator, as those sources can help you give a better scope on the whole story, where most of the times the wiki articles are mainly giving you a summary of the story, and depending who's writing them, the author may sometimes bend the story and could even be a bit biased, where in their writings they may be a little bit manipulative. On the article written about this alleged pilot, it gives a precise date on its one and only airing, being on Boxing Day of 1985. Now, scrolling down to the very bottom, we can see that this page doesn't have any references, so we don't know as to where the author got that exact date from. So, in my opinion, that's a little bit of a red flag. But hey, they use the word rumoured, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And looking around on the internet, I certainly couldn't find anything on my end with that date. A few niche sources claim that Fireman Sam began airing in Welsh on Boxing Day of 1985, but there's no mention of the episode being a pilot. But going by official contemporary sources, Fireman Sam began airing in the fall of 1987, so these other writings online are probably inaccurate. However, what I did find out that the first Fireman Sam episode titled The Kite began recording on January 8th of 1985, and a lot of the copyright data on Fireman Sam merch does often list the year as 1985, so maybe that's where that year is getting associated with the false pilot. Actually, here's a further idea. What if the actual pilot to Fireman Sam is just literally the first episode of the show, The Kite, since there are references of that being the first episode in development. Thus, that elusive pilot episode has been right in front of us that entire time. But hey, that's just my conclusion of the story. Maybe for all I know, I got the story completely backwards. It would be lovely if the original crew and creators could come forward, providing some more clarity on the early years of the show. I would be perfectly happy if they prove everything that I said in this video to be completely wrong, as whatever the outcome would be, it would just be a delight to learn far more about this classic show.